Respect your elders, a phrase we hear throughout our youth, a value passed down from generation to generation. This value is significant to remember as we stand on the shoulders of giants. With the contributions and accomplishments forged throughout their lifetime, our seniors have paved the road for our youth to have a brighter future. Let's take a look back to the past, a glimpse into a simpler time, so that we may recognize and reflect on the remarkable journeys endured by the most cherished members of our community. Incorporated in 1920, Indian Head was a thriving small town during the years of World War II. This scenic peninsula is straddled by the Potomac River and the Madwoman Creek. In addition to the town, this area has been the site of the Indian Head Naval Surface Warfare Center, creating a unique community of townspeople that shared both military and civilian values. The individuals interviewed in this film witnessed the early days of the town of Indian Head.
I've been here over 60 years. My husband and I moved here in 1957 when we got married, and we were married for 55 and a half years before he passed. We have 4 children. We have 8 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren.
We moved here on April 1st, 1941. I don't remember it, but my mother said we had a foot of snow that night.
We moved to Indian Head, I think in 1942, early part of 42, just after the war started.
It was, I would say, it wasn't bad. It was, I can't recall how many lived in that circle, but most of us was African Americans. After I moved off the Diefenbach, I moved to East Wilson, which is right around the corner here.
I've lived in Potomac Heights all my life, which is just outside of the town of Indian Head. My mother grew up in Pomfret. My father grew up in Waldorf. I married my husband. He also was from Potomac Heights. I want everyone to know how wonderful our childhood was growing up there.
I didn't find out until later on when I joined the senior citizens down here that my cousin lived on the same street, only 3 or 4 houses down.
It was wonderful growing up in Indian Head at that time. It was considered a small town. My grandfather, we start with him. Of course, the base came here 1890, and he was living in Pomfret, a young businessman, and he came very shortly after that and built this very large store on what is now the corner of Mattingly Avenue. The street was named after him after a while. He sold clothes and different things like that, but he also added groceries, anything he thought the people needed or wanted.
Growing up, we had the skating rink and we had the movie theater. We mostly played ball outside and just played with our friends or went down the woods or went swimming. There was never a lack of anything to do.
A lot of times the kids would, after breakfast, just go out and do all sorts of things in the woods, and probably the parents never saw them until they come back for dinner.
My husband, before he went on the police department, owned a security company, and he came down here to check schools out. When he found out about this house down here on Mattingly Avenue, he brought me down because we were looking for houses at that time. I saw it and I said, oh, I need that house. We just love it. We really do. It's changed a lot.
When I grew up in Potomac Heights, there were almost 500 homes. We all went to the same school. We were in walking distance of all of our friends. We played outside all day and came home at dinner time. There was not a lot of trouble or anything. We just had a really wonderful time.
I remember my father griping because they raised the rent $2. At the time, it was $30 a month, and that included your water and electricity.
We had a little carry-out up there was called Charlie's. And we would come out there and get our meals at lunchtime. And the meals was only 75 cents at that time. And he would make sure that you had plenty to eat. He might have a special that day, but he might run out, but he'd make sure you had something to eat before you left out of there.
So I have a newspaper article that says that when the people first moved to Potomac Heights, and my parents were the second ones to buy a home there, that the cost was $27 a month, and it paid for your house, and it paid for your utilities because there were no public utilities at that time. So the $27 included your gas and electric, and it included a maintenance crew that came and fixed things. I mean, if your toilet was stopped up, you called them and they came and fixed it. If your furnace wasn't working, somebody came and fixed or replaced whatever needed to be done. I can remember at one time they came to fix our toilet, and one of my sisters had flushed some old bean soup down the toilet, and it ended up there was a ham bone down there.
Just all the families in the town, you know, most of the children you went to school with, and you went to church with them, and you saw them all the time. And it was just a really tight-knit group of people. They would do anything to help the other. I think that's the nicest part of it.
As we got older, we had pretty much a run of the base. As a teenager or a younger kid, you could go all over the base except maybe security areas. We had a theater on the base that the kids only paid 10 cents to go to the theater.
I had a movie down here in Glamour, a little movie place, and I do believe it was about like 25 cents to get into the movie. And we had to go, we went upstairs and the others went downstairs. I was military, but I came to work down here as a civilian. I worked in explosives. I worked to save lives. My job was to build seat ejectors for the plane. The pilot, for when he injects him out of the seats, and the parachute would open up. So that was my job. When I left there, I was an expert on doing that job, and I loved my job. And I retired after 31 years.
At the time, the gate was not where it is now. It was further down. And all the housing areas was not enclosed with fencing or anything. Anybody could come in and visit people, and it wasn't fenced in like inside the base is now.
If the neighbor needed something, they would send one of the kids to your house and say, you know, do you have any vanilla? I'm making a cake and I don't have vanilla.
Everybody pretty much knew each other and they cared about each other. That was the thing that drew us down here, really. Nobody had to lock any doors ever. You could go away on a vacation for 2 weeks, and you could ask your neighbor, can you go in there and check, make sure everything's okay.
I would like to see the closeness come back of the neighbors. You know, of course, at that time, most women stayed home, so you had more time, I guess, to visit, that kind of thing.
And so people just shared. If somebody had a watermelon, all the kids close by would be called to get watermelon. It was wonderful.
You were close, and if you had a problem, all you had to do was call a neighbor or a relative in the area, and they would come and probably bring somebody else to help. We helped each other all the time. And as I say, when we come to the post office, they would say, somebody's sick, let's get organized. That's very special, I think, in people. So I do miss that.
At the time, around late 40s and 50s, there were 3 grocery stores on here in Indian Head, and they seemed always to be doing good business. So it really amazes me that can't support a grocery store nowadays.
Everything was very carefree. They had the railroad station, it was the railroad tracks, and at noontime every day the trains would come by, and all the kids in the neighborhood, they'd go to run and watch the trains go by, and it was a very country place.
The old the Eli's store started up here.
We had Eli's department store down here. They had a furniture store, they had a Highs, they had a couple of drugstores down here, a DGS, A&P, Klondike Ike's, People's Drugstore. So anything you wanted was really down here. And we came down just after they closed. They had a little theater up in Glymont and a bowling alley. It was a very self-sufficient town. Yeah, the kids loved it down there. We used to go down there for picnic lunches, and that was before they built all the townhouses. And you'd be down there sitting, and all of a sudden you'd hear this kaboom, thump, 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 and horses would be riding back and forth. For us, and we were city folks, this was just, it was heaven for us.
We had anything that we needed. We had stores. We had a Safeway there. We had a post office. It's hard to believe that there was that much there. We didn't need to leave the area at all.
And my father always said, if a new family came to town, if you need a place to live, you needed a job, go to Mr. Mattingly, his father, and he would help you. You need a coat for your child, he said, pay me when you can. So he really did organize a lot of things in the town, including the town itself. And he was the first president of the town commissioners. And many years later, my husband became the first mayor.
I was elected to the town council, and I felt that it needed a woman in there. And a lot of my children's parents wanted me to be in there, and I got in there to start with in 1991. For 2 years, I had vice mayor, and 18, I had councilwoman. And I think I was the only, I know I was the only woman, black woman on the council, and I think it still stands that way for Charles County.
A whole lot of stuff didn't change. One time we had an A&P down here. The department store, Mr. Eli's, that was one of the biggest things back there then. When you get off from work, you either went to Eli's department store or to, which back there then was called A&P. You could get your groceries and go on home.
My grandfather retired in the 1940s because he wasn't well, and Eli came to Indian Head at that time by himself. I don't think he was married at that time. And he leased the store from the Mattingly family. And so he just walked into a really nice setup. It was already there for him. And later he wanted to buy that where the townhouses are today. That whole area was where their home was. And he wanted to buy that, but his offer wasn't what the family thought it should be. So that didn't go through. And at that time, he said, I'm going to take care of the family and take care of the town. And he moved down the hill, and he said, the town will die. And of course, to some extent it did, because he built a very large complex down there. And that's how it happened. And of course, the senior center was the post office. In the last 35 years, My father's brother, Joe Mattingly, was the postmaster. And that was the greeting place. And if you walked, like the children, sometimes older children, would walk to the post office to get the mail. And God forbid you do something you weren't supposed to, because you were either related to or knew the neighbors real well. And the time you got home, your mother already knew what you did. They had one-room schoolhouses around here. And I know there was one on Raymond Avenue that my aunts and uncles went to. And then, of course, people in Glamont walked to what is now West Williams Funeral Home. That was a schoolhouse at one time. So little by little, we got other buildings, but that was how everything got started. Of course, when my father was younger, they built the first Lackey High School, where the elementary school is now on the Village Green.
I went to the elementary school, that's of course no longer there, and later on to Lackey, which is of course no longer there either, but they moved Lackey from here on the Village Green out to Potomac Heights, and we were the first class to graduate there in 1955.
So I went to Lackey. I went to Indian Head Elementary School.
Lackey High School. Back in the day, there was a Lackey right down here where Jim Smallwood is now.
Lackey wasn't big enough to have a football team, so they pretty much concentrated on the soccer teams at that time.
I don't think I had a favorite subject. I didn't like any of them. I just went because I had to go.
Later on, when I got out of the service, my future wife moved back here, and we decided to get married. So she went to Lackey too, so we were sort of connected this whole area together. So
when they had the Lackey on the Village Green, they would have a May Day, and that was the big event of the year. And you didn't have to have a child in the high school at that point. It was so nice, everybody in the town would come over to the Village Green and enjoy that.
We had an arts fest here, and the tents were set up, music playing the whole time, exhibits and things going on. It was just a beautiful time, and we had National Night Out where we had parades, and we had the fire department in the parade, all of their machines and everything, and we have the town council. In fact, I was in the road in a canoe and it looked like water in the parade, but it wasn't. Mike Jones from Auto Body Shop was actually pulling that canoe in the parade, and I was riding along with my pedals. So
every Saturday, without fail, we would play football right up here on the Village Green. And all of the guys in town in those days, they didn't go into service. They weren't drafted, so they were still here. So we would all show up on Saturday morning on the Village Green and choose up sides and play football all day long. And so that was probably an important thing that I did when I was a teenager.
School was wonderful as a child. We had a lot of activities, school activities. I was a star pitcher on the softball team, the fastest pitcher around. I was a star basketball player, and I was a majorette, so I was very involved in school activities.
I like the social activities they had, and I was also on the parish recreation council too, and everybody got involved in any activities the town had. We had the pole raising for the fife and drum. People, they'd try to climb the poles, and it was just a lot going on, and people were very interested. The 4th of July in 1975, just a year before the bicentennial, we started with the fireworks down here. We had $500 to spend. And so people came with Cokes and all that, and it started around 6 o'clock in the evening. It wasn't an all-day thing, but it was wonderful. That started for $500, and then the next year the Heights helped us for another $500. So we started out with about $1,000, and you can see where the fireworks display has come in that time. But things like that it was very community-oriented, and people just enjoyed each other, really enjoyed each other.
Well, I did 40-plus years in the school system. Only 2 years in Prince George's, the rest were in Charles County. I taught in the elementary school. I did, mostly first grade. In the school, I also did what I was in charge of the I-HELP program. It was Indian Head Early Learning Program. But mostly I had first grade and enjoyed every bit of it. I wanted to be a teacher when I was growing up. And to be a teacher, you have to do a lot of things. You have to love children, for one thing. And that was my main influence. I wanted to really love children and be out in the community and be with families.
I went to work as a telephone operator soon after my daughter was born. And I worked my way all the way up to being an engineer by the time I retired, so I had a good career.
I got a job for 3 months. Some of the people have heard about this, the spoon factory out near the airport. They made wooden spoons and popsicle sticks. And 3 months, I figured that was too hard to work. That's when I joined the Air Force.
And I went from there, and I'm still in the Air Force. Went to Saudi Arabia for 12 months in the Air Force. Came back to this area and went to Georgetown University for 4 years. Got a degree from Georgetown. Then I got a job out of Georgetown, so I worked in the electronics industry for the rest of my career in the Air Force.
Joined the Air Force, and they sent me to drafting school, even though it was the Air Force. The Air Force didn't have a drafting school, so they sent me down here to Fort Belvoir to go to the drafting school, which was nice because I could come home every weekend.
Got out of the Air Force and came back up to this area, and I went to Georgetown University for close to over 12 years. It was for 12 years. I got a degree out of Georgetown. Then I got a career job out of Georgetown in the electronics industry. And I was in there for a long time.
Technology is not my cup of tea, I suppose. But I did learn to type. I learned to use the computer. and now I'm trying to learn to use an iPhone.
I became an executive in the electronics industry, had my own private office for 4, 5, 10 years, and we had computers, these new handheld computers in the office, and that was the new introduction to the electronics industry. And I was in there for, God knows, 20 years.
I was a secretary, do whatever they wanted me to do. I also taught school for about a year up at St. Mary's Star of the Sea, too. I taught the second grade up there. But in the town, it was basically no computers, no nothing like that. The typewriter was the big thing, and just answered the phone and tried to help people.
What would you say your happiest moment that you can recall being an Indian Head?
My happiest moment?
Happiest moment.
Mm-hmm. I'm still alive. Happiest moment, I would say, I retired. When I worked here on base, I did not have a stressful job. It was a good job. I also I used to work with the union. I was a VP in the union, and I trained lots of people.
Well, actually, I am proud of my whole family, and I'm proud of myself for being a teacher, and being in the council and with my age now, I'm still getting out, I'm still driving, I'm still doing things that I want to do.
I always wanted to paint, and I never had any lessons, but I always felt that I had the passion to want to try to do it. And so now I'm oil painting, and I'm getting pretty good at it, so I'm real proud of what I've done.
When I met my future husband, I'd known him for some time. We belonged to the same church and the choir, but I never expected to connect with him. And he was a few years older, and he was in the Navy and came home on leave and asked me to go out. And so that was special. He was a special person, and but he's been gone almost 25 years, so I really miss him.
I gotta say, I guess when I got married. And that takes us back to Indian Head. I met my wife when she was 8 years old, and I was 10 down here on the base. Her father was in the Navy.
I've been married 62 years now, the same woman who was a local girl from the Waldorf area. Had 4 children, still have them. They're all grown now.
I have 2 sons that work here on base. Both of them are supervisors.
Well, definitely the memories, definitely the fact that we've raised both our children here. I'm real close to our church, St. Mary's Star of the Sea. It's 2 doors down. That was a gift right there. I like the area. It's grown up a lot, and there's things that have changed that for the good, and then some not for the good.
I think growing up in Indian Head was the important thing in my life.
Yeah, Indian Head's still nice a place to live. They have the village green and the nice areas.
People love the village green. I go down there walking with our dog, and bikers that come from all the way up in Western Maryland come down here and say, what a treasure you have in this park. It's just wonderful. And now with the bike trail that they've made, people love it down here. They come from all over. I don't want to leave here. They'll probably have to carry me out feet first. I love this little town, and I'd like to see it come back to something about what it was. I hate to see these vacant buildings. That is very sad, and I know it is for a lot of us old-timers. We'd like to see something else happening down here.
I would like to see some business here in Indian Head. I would like to see business, small business. I would like to see to have the bank, department store, whatever.
And I loved growing up in Potomac Heights. I'll soon be 74 years old, and I still have more friends than I can count on my 2 hands. I'm talking lifelong friends that grew up in that same community, and we all are thrilled when we see each other.
Well, there are others who, of course, enjoy the history too in the town, but I just love it. And my father, as I say, lived to be 93, and he talked about history all the time. So I try to retain as much of that, and I've put a lot of that in print, and have a lot of old pictures, that kind of thing.
What I do for fun?
Yes.
Well, that's a good question. I'm 86 years old now, and I look for fun.
I think I've always been a kind and a good person. Never drank or smoked or got in any trouble. I always thought of others. I always was a hard worker. I never really thought about being rich. I just wanted to be happy.
I left a mark some kind of way, hope it was a good one. I see a lot of my students, and they tell me things, and they were glad that I was their teacher, and that I was very strict. And if I hadn't been, they probably wouldn't be where they are now. And that's what they tell me.
Well, I appreciate you coming and sparing my little bit of knowledge that I do have. I'm still here. I am a senior citizen that you can see. I have 6 kids. 4 of my kids are in the government. My daughter's getting ready to retire. Appreciate coming in, and y'all asking me to come in.
Well, you have to treat everybody the way you wanted to be treated. and just love everybody. I mean, life is too short.